Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is David Tasker, and I'll be your host for today's webinar with Golden Horse Minerals Limited, ASX ticker code GHM, a company currently generating strong momentum with its exploration and development work at Southern Cross in Western Australia. Joining me today is the company's Managing Director, Nicholas Anderson. Before we dive into today's content, a quick note that Nick will be available to answer your questions at the end of the session. So if you'd like to ask anything during the presentation, please use the Q&A function on your screen, and we'll do our best to get through as many of those questions as we can. I'd now like to introduce Nick, who will run through the formal presentation. Nick, over to you.
Thanks, David. Welcome everyone to, well, this will be the maiden webinar for Golden Horse, so go easy on me, please. For the guys out there that know the story, we're grateful for your support, and for anyone else who's new, welcome, and I hope you enjoy it. Next slide, please. In terms of Golden Horse, in terms of the highlight, we have a really large portfolio of tenure and assets in Southern Cross in Western Australia. Southern Cross sits halfway between Kalgoorlie and Perth, about a 4-hour drive out of Perth. We have 130 square kilometres of tenure, over 100 kilometres of strike along the Greenstone Belt in Southern Cross. We have some really interesting projects, a really significant brownfield asset called Hopes Hill, which we'll be talking through and focusing on today, with significant potential that we'll be building towards. We have a great little team led by Graham Sloan, our chairman, who's ex-Karora and Fosterville MD, and we have significant support from our major shareholder, Emerald Resources. We have been drilling consistently since late January, since we listed, and we've been putting those results out into the market, and we'll be running through a fair bit of that today. In terms of what we've delivered, we've drilled 40 holes to date, roughly, at Hopes Hill. We're hitting great mineralisation the entire length of this historical pit. Some of the numbers are here to see: 40 at 4.5, 61 at 2.5, but more importantly, we're hitting them consistently along this entire strike. Pre-IPO, 18 transactions were completed to put together this package of tenure, which led to a really well-supported IPO in December. We raised 18 million. Since then, we've got to work. We've got our environmental approvals in place, and we started drilling late January. We haven't stopped since then. We've been putting out these results you can see on the screen fairly consistently. We picked up an additional little asset in February called Irene Betty, which is key to what we're doing, and I'll run through. And we have completed, more than 8,000 metres now on these assets, and we're going to continue. We've just received some EIS funding. We're looking to bring a diamond rig on site and get a bit more structural understanding of what we're working with. In terms of the corporate overview, we listed it at 25 cents. We're now trading around 40, so we're up 60% in 5 months, which is a strong endorsement of what we've been doing. Our market cap still pretty small, sitting at 66 million, but building. We're fast past the first corner here, but we've got a long way to go in this race in building this company. The nice little board, which I mentioned, it's worth pointing out. Brett Donacci there is one of the Emerald team who's supporting the company, which is very helpful. We've had good growth in the share price with the consistent news flow and the consistent results. And our register, it's a nice mix of supportive instos, family offices, and then a nice little bit of retail as well. So back to Southern Cross. Here's this little picture of the Hopes Hill pit. It's worth pointing out this pit averages around 60 metres depth when it was mined in the 90s. It's 1.3 kilometres long, or 6.5 furlongs for the horsey people on the call. And you can see that it varies from 30 to 80 metres deep. And we'll run through why it was so shallow and where the opportunity is over the next couple of slides. In terms of our project in Southern Cross, we have mentioned it's halfway from Perth to Cal. You can see that on the right. We have talked about the extensive land holding, which you can see on your slide, but why we like Southern Cross and what draws to the area is historically it's produced more than 12 million ounces as a region. It's very supportive of gold exploration and production. And most of those ounces that have been produced have been at grade, and we're talking 2+ grams and significantly higher. So that's what we're looking for, and that's what we're trying to build. We do have a multitude of advanced projects here, with the key one being Hopes Hill, where the recent drill results have been highly prospective. Just earlier this week, we got some indicative met results back, the first bottle rolls we've done, which showed an average of 97% recoveries in fresh rock. So that's a really significant step for the company, and we'll work through that in a bit more detail later on in the deck. We have everything we need at Southern Cross to operate. We're on granted MLs. There are nearby processing mills in the region. We have the main highway that runs from Perth to Cal through the middle of the town. We have the rail as well. In town, there's an 80-person camp attached to the local pub for our guys to stay. So there's nothing we need that we don't have to continue our operations at the moment. We have focused on the core asset, but we do have, 130 kilometres of strike along this greenstone belt, and we do have a number of targets that we will be exploring as we progress. Moving to Hopes Hill, our flagship asset that you saw the picture of earlier. It did produce more than 200,000 ounces at 2.2 grams back in the 90s. But this is just sort of building from there. The scale and the size of this deposit, we're just starting to understand. You can see we've got 35 holes there on the left-hand side of this pit. It was historically constrained to the north, to the west, and the south by tenure boundaries. We own all the tenure now. We don't have those constraints, and that's what is allowing us to look further at this. Historically, it was only drilled down to about 100 metres. We don't have any data below that, but what we do have from the holes we've been drilling is significant intercepts the entire length of this pit. We have a couple of the big ones in the middle, which we'll run through in a cross section, the 60 at 2.5 and 40 at 4.5. But we have some nice little high grade to the north, 6 at 3.8 and 13 at 2.4. And what really got the team excited, and we'll run through in a bit more detail, is down south. We hit 24 metres at 2.5. It's only been mined very shallow to the south, and we've got minimal data on it. But what that tells us is this pit does continue both to the north and the south, as well as significantly at depth, and we'll work towards that. It is open genuinely in all directions. The cross section I talked about through the centre of this historical pit. The first hole we put down, hole number 1, lifted significantly and ran, under the old pit. It hit 60 metres at 2.5, and whilst relatively shallow, it really verified what we were saying, that this pit didn't cease mining because it ran out of ore. It ceased mining due to tenure constraints. To put that in perspective, the collar for that hole sits 30 metres to the west of the wall, and it sits on the neighbouring tenure. So having both pieces of this ground together is going to enable us to really unlock the potential of this pit. We ran our program up and down the strike before we came back to follow this up. Hole 19, we went from the same collar position and we went steeper, and that's where we hit the increased grades. We hit 40 metres at 4.5 as part of an 83-metre intersection. We're going to continue to step back now and drill deeper under the entire length of this pit, starting in the central zone, and really verify our assumption that this grade and this opportunity continues at depth. There's a number of examples in the region of mines, Copperhead's down at 680 metres and still in ore and still going. So this strike, this greenstone belt, has all the opportunity we're looking for. I mentioned we got these Met results back early this week. The team's been working pretty hard to get them out into the market for you guys so you can see it. Whilst they are indicative from bottle rolls, having an average of 96.7% across 11 samples is truly exceptional. They're all in fresh rock. It's free milling. It will allow us to, process through a normal CIL, CIP plant, like the ones in the region, or if we choose to build our own. And most importantly, it was consistent, the length of the pit. There's been a number of very good, if not great, projects that have come undone, through recoveries and through lack of Met data. So this is a fantastic result for the horse, and we're pretty thrilled to share it with you all. It's not just about Hopes Hill. If we step back and look at the historical data we have in what we call the Hopes Hill district, this 4 kilometre strike, there are a number of shallow historical intercepts that haven't been followed up. If you look to the north, there's 3 numbers there, probably a bit small to see on your screen, but numbers like 12 at 6, 18 at 4, very shallow, not followed up, and on the exact same strike as the Hopes Hill pit. They were sitting in neighbouring tenure, and they haven't had the work done on them yet. So part of our plan is going to be drill out to the north and see how far this pit extends. Similarly to the south, I mentioned right at the start that we picked up an asset called Irene Betty. It flows down through Hopes Hill south to Irene Betty. There's historical numbers there, 8 to 18 from 14 metres, so quite shallow. We're going to be following this up with our drill program and hopefully stretching the pit further to the south as well. And then, it's worth looking at some of this historical shafts and other information when you walk the ground. There appears to be a couple of parallel structures further to the west at Hopes Hill, and we'll be looking to see what the old timers were chasing there as well as we build out, what should be a fairly significant maiden resource. Stepping back even further now, and we come to our 130 kilometres of strike, and the story we listed on was the multiple targets we had. We've been a bit distracted, to be honest, with the success we've had at Hopes Hill, but that's a good thing. But stepping back and looking at it, we have 25 targets in this belt, all backed up by some form of historical data, either very shallow drilling or rock chips or GHM. And so we are going to continue to work through assessing and bringing a couple of these other assets along as we look for the next big opportunity as well. We did a little program in Hakes Find just before Christmas. So while we were listing, we had a small drill rig running, which was great. We hit some good numbers, 12 at 3.5 from 24, 11 at 3.4. So we know there's grade there. We'll come back to that deposit and drill that out a bit further as part of our program as well. And some of these smaller deposits will allow us, that opportunity for early production if we want to be talking to our neighbours and do some toll treading. We have covered this a bit. The town of Southern Cross, it's a great little town. It's very supportive of mining and of us. We're using a local contractor, JDC, for our drilling at this stage, which is great. There's a good workforce there. Everything we need to operate is in the town. There's an airfield, rail, power, water. We've covered that fairly well. A little picture of the pub and the camp. It's got 80 rooms. It's where we stay. Great relationship with the owners. It's only 7 k's from our site, so the guys can be all the comfort in town and then on site pretty early in the morning, which is great. A couple of processing centres nearby, Edna May, 60 k's to the west from Ramelius, and then Martha Lock, 30 k's to the south, owned by Bartow Gold. What do we do now? We've had some great success with the drill bit so far. We've got some really good results with those recoveries. Where to from here? We're bringing in a diamond rig. We got this EIS funding through for a couple of holes, which has been fantastic from the Western Australian government. But we're back to work. We're going to step further out on the pit. We're going to drill deeper. We're going to get that diamond rig working, understand the structure and the geology of what we've got in a bit more detail here, and then we'll be pushing north and south. Not to forget some of the more regional targets, we'll be trying to build them into the program as well going forward. So we're going to be really busy, to be honest, for the rest of the year, which is great. And so why Golden Horse? Look, it's been a really phenomenal effort from the team to consolidate this belt in the way they have, which is exciting. We have genuine high-grade projects here. They are brownfield projects. We have mining leases that we're operating on. We have a historical mill site. If we choose to go into that direction and go into production on our own, everything we need in place. We've got a really good little team working hard, working well together, and we will continue to do what we've done since listing, and that is keep drilling and keep getting these results out into the market, and keep everyone informed. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. A great summary of what's shaping up to be a very exciting year for Golden Horse Minerals and its shareholders. We'll now open it up to questions from the audience. As I said, if you haven't done so already, please use the Q&A function on your screen to submit your questions. A whole stack coming through. So we'll get through as many of those as we possibly can. Firstly, nearly 97% average gold recovery, as the shareholders mentioned, is very strong. Can you talk us through how this de-risks the development path at Hopes Hill?
Yeah, we were pretty thrilled with that, to be honest. These results are all in the fresh rock. We didn't have too much data in the fresh rock from the historical mining. There was a fear that they only mined the oxide out of the pit and they stopped mining, due to potential issues. I think we've put that to bed. Our theory's always been they stopped mining due to tenure constraints, and that's where this is going. So, look, there still is more work to be done on the met test work, but this is really going to help our understanding as we move towards where to take this project.
And are there any metallurgical challenges you foresee as drilling extends deeper or into new zones like Hopes Hill North or South?
Look, not at this stage. We've still got more detailed network to do when we get the diamond rig in, but we're pretty comfortable given, that was over, a 1.3 kilometre strike. We're fairly confident that things are looking very positive at this stage.
Now, you did show that photo, sort of that regional photo, because you've mentioned CIL, CIP as the likely processing route. Are there toll treatment options nearby? You threw a couple up, or are you exploring building a standalone facility?
Oh, look, it's probably still a bit early at this stage. We have spoken to both of the mills in the region, obviously. And we do have a very supportive shareholder who, has a reputation for building mills on time and under budget. So we have all options available to us, David, and we do have a historical mill site with tailings dams there. So it's very much a consideration.
And just on that, there was a question here. At Hopes Hill, did Emerald have a processing plant on that tenure historically? The point that was asked is the shareholder thought they did have that historically on that tenement.
There was a processing centre. This was well before Emerald owned the asset. It's actually just on the eastern side of the pit, which is sitting behind me. You can see the old tailings dam if you look closely, or if you go back through the presentation, you can see it on that plan view pretty clearly. So it was just sitting there at Hopes Hill, which is a great step for us if we do want to go into production. We're very much on disturbed land with a historical tailings dam, so we are a reasonable way down that path, of seeking approvals if we go down that direction.
And just on that, as you mentioned, Hopes Hill is on a granted mining lease with historical production. How does that fast track your pathway to development compared to your peers?
Oh, look, it helps enormously to have that in place. There's still a number of hurdles to jump, but having a disturbed ground with historical sites and tailings already there is a big step along that way.
In terms of just going through all the questions, apologies, stack coming through. What's the permitting or approvals landscape look like at Southern Cross? Are you expecting any bottlenecks?
Oh, look, we're working with all the stakeholders on that. There's always going to be hurdles, but we have good relationships with Murray Gooley on that front, which we're looking to continue, and we're working through all the regulatory, channels. Hopefully, we don't see any major hurdles at this point, but it's very early.
And I know it probably still is early, but this is a big focus. A lot of the questions coming through. How does the proximity to existing mills and infrastructure in the region influence your development strategy or potential partnerships?
Well, it all comes into the consideration, I guess, David. Yeah, look, we did run a sample parcel 18 months ago. Before I joined, the company ran a sample parcel through that Bartow mill. It had, from one of the assets, it had solid recoveries around 93-95%. They made a good little bit of money out of that, just processing old stockpiles. So there is that relationship, with that mill. And obviously it's interesting, with the plans out to the west with Edna May. So it all forms part of the picture in my opinion. But we do have the site there if we do wish to go on our own, which is an opportunity as well.
A few very direct questions here, so I'll just put them to you as presented. When are the next batch of assays from Iron Betty expected?
From Iron Betty, yeah, we have done a small drill program on that. They should be coming through any time. So hopefully we'll get them out into the market as soon as we reasonably can.
You've drilled over 8,000 metres of RC since January. What's the immediate focus of the next round of drilling? I know you did touch on it. Depth strike or stepping out into new areas like Irene Betty?
It's going to be a combination. We do want to step back and drill a bit deeper and get that understanding ready for the diamond rig when it comes. And we'll pre-collar a number of holes for that to have the diamond most efficient going through the ore body. We are looking to extend the strike as well, as we touched on, and that will go all the way down to that Irene Betty deposit and maybe even a little bit further as we push towards the Salt Lake down south. So we're building all that into our plans, and we're going to keep that drill rig running, and that is our goal. And we do want to keep pushing out that information into the market every few weeks as the batches come in.
With mineralisation open in all directions and deeper hits returning strong grades, I'm not asking you to sort of put out a forward-looking statement, but how far do you think this system could go?
Well, we won't put out a forward-looking statement. We'll get in trouble. But I used a couple of examples earlier. The Copperhead mine is down 680 metres and still going. It's turned into an underground there. Fraser's was mined down to 280. It's still open at depth, and we currently have proved up a surface expression here of 1.3 Ks, which could be double that as we extend it north and south. So there's a very good chance when you've got that much at surface that the system has a long way to go.
Just in terms of initial mineral resource estimate, firstly, do you have a target date on when you think that might be coming out? But also, do you expect to include Hopes Hill North, South and Irene Betty in that initial MRE, or do you think they'll follow separately?
That's a good question, David. We're working systematically towards that. We don't want to pin down a specific date or a specific number what we're targeting, but we did say in the IPO in the first quarter next year that is still on our radar. When we come out, we think it'll be substantial. That's what we're looking for. Will those other extensions be in it? Look, the drill bit will tell us, but hopefully we can pull this pit south all the way to Irene Betty, and north. We can follow up some of those really interesting intercepts from surface and see what sits deeper, because we just don't have data at this point. So we'd love to, but we can't guarantee it. I
won't put these to you. A couple of people are actually giving me suggestions on horses to bet on in future races, but taking the horsing theme a little bit too.
There's only one horse to bet on.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. I wasn't going to put up another suggestion. In terms of just looking through these questions, can you mine sufficiently to fund expansion? As it seems to me, this is a question from a shareholder, there is a larger opportunity than originally envisaged.
We were always confident that this was an enormous opportunity, and that's what we went out on the back of, and that's what we got support for in the IPO, to be honest. We're hitting some numbers that, have exceeded our expectations, which is great. And we think there's a lot more to it. There are opportunities to look at some of these smaller pits, and smaller little deposits that we have data on around, and do some early toll treating as a funding option. That's something we'll consider and continue working towards. But at the moment, we're really focused on building out our knowledge of this key deposit.
Sorry, in line with that, you've clearly defined multiple brownfield and greenfield targets across more than 4 kilometres of trend. How do you balance exploration with resource conversion in the short term?
That is also a good question. It really is. It's balancing funds, equipment, people, to be honest, and trying to manage market expectations. We can't do everything, but we're certainly going to try. And look, it's nothing that we haven't done before, to be honest. So we'll keep working towards all those goals.
Probably further to that, can you talk about your capital position and how far the current budget will take you through drilling, network, and into resource definition? And probably an extension to that, you've got a major shareholder there at sort of circa 20%. How supportive are they to the plans of the company going forward?
We'll start with cash. At the end of March, we had 10.8 million in the bank, and that is sufficient to run us through our programs through to the end of the year. That's why we raised a big lick on the IPO, to really get out and put some meat into what we were doing, get that 25,000 metres drilled, and understand what we're dealing with here in Southern Cross. In terms of our major shareholder, look, to date, they've been fantastic. They've offered technical support and advice, and all indications are they're very supportive of the results we're having and what we're doing. So we hope that continues.
I'm just going to put the questions to you as they're coming through. Adding to that, that was an extension to a question that someone else had previously asked. Is in your mind Edna processing plant on the radar for acquisition? And if it was, do you have any idea what it would cost?
Well, that's quite a blunt question. Look, it's an interesting opportunity. It's a really big plant. It's 2.9 million tonnes. That takes a lot of feed. Single train, my understanding as well, so you can't really run at half speed. I don't know. Ramelius is pretty busy with Spartan at the moment. So it's a really interesting plant. It's close to our operations, it's 60 k's away. But I have no idea what they'd want for it or what their plans are at this stage.
From a news flow point of view, what should investors expect in the next 3 to 6 months?
They should expect what they've been receiving so far. We're really trying to, as the assays come in, work through them, understand them, and get them out into the market, pretty quickly. I think that's important to keep the market informed. So as we keep drilling and we keep building the story, we want to bring everyone along the journey with us. We got that network back on Monday and we got it out on Wednesday. So the team worked pretty hard to turn that around and get that out, and that then pulls our focus away from other things. But we are pretty committed to keeping our shareholders updated with what we're doing and where we are.
What would a successful end to the 2025 field season look like for Golden Horse? If I was a shareholder and we get to the end and we're looking at the end, what does success look like?
Oh, look, I think continue to replicate what we've been doing. I feel like we've been very successful in executing the plan we set out to do, which was to get to work on these assets and start to build a story, and we're doing that. I'd love to see this mineralisation continue at depth. We think it will, and I want to know what happens north and south. But I don't want to neglect some of the regional opportunities, which is what we sold the IPO on, was this enormous strike we've got. So we need to be bringing them along as well. So more of what we've been doing, David, I think will be a great result for the company and for its shareholders.
A couple of more direct questions. Are there any partnerships, offtake discussions, or third-party processing arrangements underway or on the radar?
There's nothing that hasn't been disclosed. We're having discussions with most of the parties in the region, as any good corporate business should, to understand who's operating in our space and what they're all up to. We look forward to working with everyone in the region, going forward. And the opportunities that pop up will hopefully be ready to take advantage of.
Last question from a shareholder come through, very direct, but I'm going to put it to you anyway. Clearly, gold price where it is, M&A heating up, seeing a lot of consolidation. Southern Cross, a very busy neighbourhood, as you've mentioned, with Golden Horse having a very dominant position in the neighbourhood. Do you think you may be taken over before you realise the full potential of this project?
Look, hopefully not. Be a good reason to buy some shares, though, to help get that share price up as a defensive mechanism. That'd be fantastic. But it is a key risk to the business, to be honest. With the numbers we've hit, we're still only a 65 mil market cap company, and it wouldn't take much for someone big to come and knock us off. But we're going to continue. We can't do too much about that except continue to deliver what we're saying that we're going to do, and hopefully the market will follow on that. So we'll just keep busy. We'll drill holes. We'll find gold, and we'll go from there.
That has exhausted all the questions that have come through, and so that does wrap up today's session. On behalf of everyone at Golden Horse Minerals and our audience here today, thank you, Nick, for the update, and thanks to all of you for joining us. So thanks, Nick.
Thanks, David. Cheers, son.
And if you'd like more information or to follow the company's news, visit the website or follow the ASX ticker code GHM. Have a great day, and we look forward to keeping you updated on Golden Horse's progress. Thanks, Nick, and thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.